welcome to the Mindset Michelle TV show. We're so super excited to have you joining us again today and to be with us for yet more incredible insights from these amazing, and I'm just so blown away by what the special guests are sharing with us each episode. And today is no different. Today we have the fabulous Osman Mah. Hello, Osman.
Hello, Michelle. So excited to be on your show. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
It's so lovely having you on the show. And for those of you that aren't aware of Osman, Osman is an incredible leadership expert and leadership specialist. He works with immigrants, helping them to acclimatise to Australia with their career goals, with their personal goals, with all of those goals. And as an immigrant himself 25 years ago from Myanmar, I'm sure he has incredible experience and knowledge about what he's helping other leaders develop in. But I'd like to know more. Myanmar leadership, this is a lot of different areas and different wonderful things about who you are, Osman. Do you want to share, to start with, a little bit more about you and your background?
I would love to, and it will be my honor. So, as you said, I came to Australia 25 years ago from Myanmar as an international student. And then I finished my degree and I got a job and a wife too. And I settled in Australia since then. And I used to work in a corporate world as an individual contributor, as well as in various leadership roles, including engineering management, manufacturing management, and operation management. During that time, I worked alongside with many fellow immigrants, and I've seen their struggle and success in terms of climbing the corporate ladder. And then I developed a passion to help them achieve more success than struggle. So during pandemic, I actually left corporate world, and to follow my passion, I started my own training and development practice called Marvelous Coaching. So these days, I work with individuals, organizations, communities, and university as well to help my fellow immigrants to achieve the success that they wanted to achieve.
That's an incredible passion, and I really feel how your experiences and your background working in different roles, working with different immigrants has really set you up to assist people with that. It's interesting talking with someone like yourself who as an adult came to Australia and set up a new life and new wife and all of that. How then do you think that you have defined success for yourself? What does success mean to you?
That's a very good question, Michelle. Success to me is really about becoming the best version of you. Right? It's really about being able to express yourself fully, being able to be fully you and be the best version of you. And I believe when you achieve that, you might call it success, it is not just good for you, but it's also good for your family, good for your community and your organization as well, and the society at large. So that's my simple definition of success. And that's my passion to help other people to achieve that success, which is all about full self-expression and becoming the best version of yourself. And quickly, I love this analogy. It's very much like, the flower flourishing fully in a big garden. It's not just good for the flower, it's also good for the garden.
And that's so lovely, and that again reflects that wider community, family. The garden isn't a standalone flower in the garden; it's part of that whole ecosystem. Yeah. And that success, you helping others and helping the community, the family, and everybody is a big part of that definition as well. And what such a lovely way of looking at success and sharing how your passion for what you do has evolved from your experiences and your background, from being a student through to corporate work that you were doing, and now running your marvelous consulting business. So given that people may work with immigrants or be an immigrant that are watching the show, What sort of suggestions might you have to help them for creating that successful mindset themselves?
Yeah. So in reality, we have a lot of barriers and struggles to achieve that success, which is about full self-expression and the best version of you, right? I use another analogy to describe that process. If you think about sport, either swimming or running, how many days would you do your best? How many times would you be able to swim at your personal best? How many times would you be able to run at your personal best? So the reality would say is that not many times. There's a lot of barriers and challenges and struggles that you have to overcome. And I was actually looking at a news article back in 2019, and there's a report that says only 1.6% of Asian Australians become CEO in the corporate world, whereas they would make up 12% of overall population, right? So you can see the disparity there, that a lot of the Asian Australian or migrant people are being held back by barriers. In fact, we actually even have a term for it. It's called bamboo ceiling. Right? So it's very much like glass ceiling. Bamboo ceiling holds you back, particularly migrants from Asia, back from proceeding into senior leadership role in corporate Australia. Right.
And I can talk more from the glass ceiling point of view, but that's an interesting point about, I've never heard bamboo ceiling before, but 6% and 12% of the population.
No, it's actually 1.6%, Michelle.
1.6%, even worse.
Yeah, even worse.
1.6. I do know that some of the research that I've looked at and come across has talked about if you were 6 foot and your name was and you were called Andrew and from an Anglo background, you made up at least 50% of the boards. I can't remember. I think this was in Europe. So I do know, unfortunately, I do know more about the glass ceiling than this bamboo ceiling. And I think it's really interesting because with that percentage of the population and the great things that diversity bring to boardrooms and leadership, what are some of the mindset things that then people from those Asian, and that we can stay with the Asian immigrant background at the moment, because these can be applicable to people from other cultures, but Correct. What sort of things would you say to them when they're looking to improve their mindset or looking to be successful?
Yeah, so there are systematic barriers and there are structural barriers, but we've got to start from within ourselves, right? That's how I like to look at. And one of the mindset barrier, as I would call it, is the limiting belief that we have. I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and he's a middle manager in a large corporation. And during the session, he was saying, I cannot become the CEO of my organization ever. And I'm like, why? Why'd you say that? And he said, because I speak with an accent and my name is not an Anglo name. And I don't look like my current CEO or my senior leaders. And worse, what he said is, I actually come from a third world country. It kind of hits me hard, right? Hearing those things, but these are real. And I would say these are big barriers that we actually create ourselves, what we call limiting belief or negative self-talk. So we got to start from there. We got to believe and have the high aspiration that we already crossed the sea and come over here. Why can't we be a CEO of any organization if you want? If you start to believe that you cannot be, then the possibility becomes zero. Right, but at least if you have that belief, even though I'm not saying just believing will actually get you there, but at least you won't reduce your possibility to zero, right? So that's one of the big mindset barrier that I've come across with a lot of my clients. And the other thing, talking about crossing the sea, there's a bit of an ironic thing. Yes, we've taken a lot of risk to come from a comfortable situation, where we grown up, we understand the culture and the context, and coming into a new culture and country is a big risk that we have taken, right? But the thing is, when we get here, a lot of migrants would have the safety mindset because they have to get a job, have a stable income, have a stable job. And the reason is that they have to support their family. That's what my parents did. They have to get a job quickly, get some money so that they can support my education. And on top of that, I will tell you this as well, is that a lot of migrants would still take the responsibility to support friends and family back home. So there's a lot on their shoulder, so they cannot take more risk, right? So they don't want to rock the boat. And therefore, that also becomes their mental barrier. They have to stay safe in their job, right? So they don't want to move around too much. And lastly, what I've said before.
So just perhaps before we go to a different idea, because I really want to unpack some of this around the limiting beliefs. And I love the examples of not your client not believing that he could become head of the organization because he didn't speak with an accent, this and that and whatever. And it's interesting because in my studies and the clients that we've worked with, every group from every culture kind of have these inherited belief systems from their family, from their parents especially. For me, my grandmother said to me one time that only rich people ate at 7 o'clock, because coming from a very poor family background in Europe, poorer people, my family worked on the shipyards, so they were at work at 5 a.m. and so dinner time for them was like 5 p.m. So they never, about 7 o'clock they might have tea and toast because that was what they ate then.
Yes.
So my mother and father didn't have that type of life and didn't have that well because we grew up here in Australia, but they carried those belief systems, like you're saying, carrying it across the ocean. They carried those belief systems here into Australia. So those subtleties around only rich people do this and we're not rich and we're this and we're that. It's fascinating, and I love how you're bringing the Asian perspective to this question around, well, we need to stay safe. So my dad worked the whole of his life in public service because he couldn't get anywhere safer than that.
Yes.
We came to Australia and he never changed jobs. He worked in the one job his whole life. It was a different time back then, but it reflects everything that you're wonderfully explaining about, the limiting beliefs, inheriting these systems, even if you're in a different country, and how that can minimize what you believe you can do. And that gentleman you were talking about, or lady that you were talking about, your coaching, it's actually not that they can't become CEO, it's that they don't believe, they don't see that they can. And more importantly, they don't quite understand how, and somebody explained this to me beautifully the other day, in some ways, by actually becoming CEO, they're then saying the belief systems of my parents are wrong. And saying that your parents are wrong in many cultures, no matter Anglo or Asian or Indian or whatever, many cultures, that type of going against your parents, it's not just a rebellious thing, it's a core thing of, they told me not to touch the hot plate, this, that, to then go, well, actually, I can earn more money than my parents, I can be more successful than my parents, is really quite a leap. And of course, being a mindset person, I'm saying you can make that leap. And that's the sort of work that I'm sure you're so beautifully supporting your clients with, is to understand those kinds of elements that they are creating as part of that bamboo ceiling. So it's not just others creating it, it's their role in creating it as well. Yeah. And you can't control the others, of course, but you can control your element and also put that to the side.
So good. Thanks for adding to what I was saying. It's very beautifully expanded. And I would just add that those deep-seated value and beliefs that influenced by the culture and the upbringing, is really hard to go against them, as you said, right? So around this, one of the things that we get told when we were growing up is that don't be the longest standing nails because you're going to get hammered down, right? But in Australia, we heard about this saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You got to speak up and you got to say out loud and express, and otherwise you're not going to get the attention and the reward that you deserve, right? So that's what I was going to say. The speaking up is one of the biggest challenges that many migrants face. And the other beautiful example that I give is the upbringing is that, think about the Asian typical family dinner. You would sit there and then you would actually have to wait your elder to start taking food. You cannot start, right? You cannot start. So what's going to happen in the meeting room and in boardrooms, and you're waiting for your seniors, your bosses, your seniors to speak, and then you think your turn is going to come, you're not going to have a chance. You're not going to have the turn. So those beliefs, values, and upbringings really influence on how we communicate as well. So it's not just the mindset, but also the way you actually express yourself. And that's what I was saying, like fully expressing yourself as a successful migrant. This is also another perspective. Not being able to express in your way actually means that you're not achieving the success that you wanted. Right.
And that's a great point. I think that difference that you're raising and flagging, which is really important for people to understand as well, especially as organisations try to become more diverse and inclusive. But that really important point that you've raised around the Western, more individualistic society versus Asian and Asiatic cultures, where it's, well, not just the collective, but more that seniority.
So we pay a lot of respect to the hierarchy and the seniority, as you said. So in a Western style meeting, management may think, well, if you've got something to say, you'll speak up. Whereas in a Asian style culture, it may be, well, he's more senior and so he's going to tell me what to do. And so you don't speak up because you don't want to embarrass the senior person, etc. That's exactly right.
We'll make them wrong, telling, and I've seen this many a time where, somebody that may be a bit more of an alpha personality that can actually get away with, you're an idiot, that's not going to work. And the boss laughs and goes, oh, yeah, you're right. As opposed to, I'm going to use females again, but females and also people from different cultures may not even speak up. And then if they do, it's not necessarily seen in a positive light. So
that is so true. That positive light is something that I want to touch on quickly, if I may. The leadership prototype, or sometimes we say leadership material, or is this employee or is this person a leadership material? And that's a perception, right? So not speaking up actually give other people a perception that you're not a leadership prototype, they're a leadership prototype or leadership material. And another thing that we always talked about is the whether you're direct and confrontational style when you're communicating. In Asia, in a lot of Asian culture, we put a lot of focus on keeping peace and strong relationship. And there's this idea called saving face. It is about not making other side lose face. So there's certain things that you avoid. Doesn't matter right or wrong, you just don't say. But this would come across the wrong, could come across the wrong way to people in Western individualist culture. And they might see that you're not being assertive and you're not being direct and you're not being, outspoken and confrontation, and all of which is part of the leadership prototype in Australia or Western culture, right? And that's my lived experience. The first time I tried to step up into leadership role, I didn't get the role. And the feedback I got was that I wasn't a leadership material. I was puzzled and confounded. And later after quite a number of discussion with people, I realized that that's because I wasn't speaking up enough, or my communication wasn't direct and assertive enough. So I had to learn to adapt to different style of communications, and that would be my advice. And that's what I've been working with a lot of my clients as well.
And I think that that's really important, and it's great that you've identified that as well, that saving face, the seniority of the people involved, and the nuances. So whether it's a Western style environment or an Asian or a global, and there's other different types of styles of cultures that we can talk about. But I think being aware of those nuances and understanding that there's an old saying about when in Rome, do as the Romans.
Yes.
So if you're in that dynamic environment where everybody's quite individualistic and Western, it's about speaking up, and it's about being seen and noticed to be described as a leader. And in those Asian style environments or those cultural sort of environments, it's about the group and what's best for the group, and the listening to the seniors and respecting the seniors.
Yeah. And the thing is, right, like communication is an art, and there's a lot of layers to that. And communication is not just like spoken words. There's your body language as well. I don't know how, in terms of time we're doing. Can I just quickly tell you a story?
Yes, please do. Don't worry about the time. That's my job.
Around non-verbal body language. As I said, my dad had to work. He was a business owner back in Myanmar, but when he came over here, he had to pick up any job, as I said, for stable income to support the family. So he worked as a process worker in a laundry, right? And one day he came back from work and he was furious and he was so angry. And I was like, "What happened, Dad?" And he's like, "I can't take it anymore. This guy really insulted me." I'm like, is a physical insult? No. He's like, "No, what happened then?" And he's like, "Oh, he really insulted me. Like he degraded me. I'm like so embarrassed, and I lost my face, and all of these." And I was like, "Just tell me what happened." He said, "Oh, he asked me to pick things up." I was like, "Yeah, okay, there's a little bit of cultural problem there, because younger people can't ask the elder people to pick things up in our culture, right?" But he's been working with this guy for a while, and I actually know him as well. He's younger, of course, but that can't be the case. So I kept on asking, "What happened? Tell me exactly, And then he said, "Well, he pointed that thing with his feet." Then I know, right, yes, you can't do that. That's the big no. That kind of body language differences, it could interpret it, incorrectly, and would come across the wrong way to different people if you're not aware of these differences and nuances, right? And there's a lot, the way we smile is different. People in Asia smile with eyes, and people in Western culture smile, big tooth, like that. And I had to practice that, and the humor is different. You can't translate humor across language and culture. So, when I first came over, I couldn't, crack the same jokes. So what it means is that sometimes people see you as too formal, too quiet, and not charismatic, and which is all part of the leadership prototype that I was saying. Leaders are very strong and assertive and humorous. As I've said, there are different style of leadership as well.
And I think that this is important as we're talking about immigrants, especially here in Australia, but in any culture. And in Australia, of course, we have so many different multinationals and internationals. So there's so many subcultures within the cultures. And even from your experience, when you worked in the corporate world, you worked with a lot of immigrants. I think one of the strange things is always meeting the surgeon from somewhere overseas that's driving the taxi or working in the coffee shop and things like that. It seems to be not just Australia, but many countries, this kind of process, the first generation work in whatever job for, like you were saying, around the safety. having that safe and secure job, because they're there to give the opportunities to their children. And then their children go up and immigrate to another country again and have this, cross-cultural thing where they're learning to do as the Romans do in that culture. And the beauty now, of course, I think, is that elements of this have started to become much more universal because everybody's on Zoom and things like that. So, for example, and don't mean to offend anybody, but if I go like that, in some cultures, doing that is actually highly offensive as well. And as you were sharing, the smile, not smiling and having a clear face in many cultures doesn't mean that I don't care or I don't this or I don't that. It just means that I'm not disrespecting you by showing my own feelings. I'm respecting you by waiting for you to tell me how to help or something like that, as opposed to a Western culture, which I've grown up in, which is like everything's described on my face.
So true, yeah. Look, Michelle, we've come a long way. I cannot have this sort of discussion. Well, that's because I was new here, but I didn't hear any of these discussion when I first came over to Australia, right? But these days, university got programs, so summer programs I actually run and facilitate. And, there are indications that we're making, moving the needles. Like, last election, we've seen, increased number of diversity, in the parliament now. I think last parliament had 1 or 2 Asian Australian, and now we have like 4 or 5, things like that. So we are moving in the right direction. I'm very happy about that. And I'm really grateful that I now am able to be a part of this process. So, opportunity like this, I'm really grateful for, Michelle, being able to talk about this. Yeah.
It's so wonderful having you on the show as well. And I know that many people watching, and like I said at the start, for themselves or for immigrants that they may know, how can they get hold of you? What's the best way of contacting you?
Yeah, so I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So I write and blog on LinkedIn every week and talk about these things and raise awareness and have discussion with individuals and teams and organizations. So the best way to reach out to me is to connect, follow, and have a chat with me on LinkedIn. So if you just type in Osman Mah, I don't think there are that many Osman Mah, so you'll see me as the first hit. So that's the best way to reach out to me.
Fabulous. And I'm fascinated to also hear then, so if you were to give some advice to your younger self, what sort of things might you say? What would you say as advice?
Very good question. Make me think and reflect. I'm approaching my 50s, so that's a lot to reflect and digest, right? I guess one of the things that I wish I had done more and better is making connections, making more friends, and not just with people, really, with the land, with the culture, with the nation, the First Nation people. You really have to immerse into the land, the culture, and the community and the society that you are now a part of, right? So my advice to my younger self would be that I connect with more people, I connect with the land, the culture, and create those meaningful connections. It not just help your career, it helps you your life. And as I said, the expression, self-expression is not just you talking, you're actually talking with other people, and it has to be meaningful for other people as well. So you really need to know how to express in that culture, in that land, on that land. So that would be my advice to my younger self: cultivate more meaningful connection.
Wonderful. And I love, again, you managed to even talk about cultivating the connection with a whole ecosystem. So like the beautiful flower in the garden example, it wasn't just cultivating a connection to yourself, to the people, it was the whole community and environment. So
exactly.
Such an honor and privilege to have you on the show today. Thank you for coming in, Osman.
As I said, we need to be talking to each other. We need to be creating a lot of meaningful connection. This is just one example. So thanks for reaching out and inviting me to on this lovely show. Really appreciate this opportunity.
Wonderful. And it's been such an honor to have you today. And to everybody watching, I hope that, again, you've heard some incredible tips and suggestions around creating that successful mindset and helping perhaps yourself or others that you may know that are immigrants to create that successful mindset and become great leaders as well. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.